The first warning that something was wrong came from a missed call, and I remember ignoring it because my daughter never called during the workday unless it was important. She was visiting me for the weekend, just a short break between deployments and training rotations, and the plan was simple: grab groceries, cook dinner, and let her relax somewhere quiet. She had parked her rental SUV near the community clubhouse because my driveway was being resurfaced, and that tiny detail, so insignificant at the time, would spiral into the most surreal confrontation of our lives. The second call came less than a minute later, and when I answered, I could hear controlled breathing on the other end, the kind that told me she was already in command mode. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't sound scared. She just said, "Dad, I need you to listen carefully. HOA security has me detained, and one of them just pulled a gun." I dropped everything and drove. By the time I reached the clubhouse parking lot, 3 things were immediately clear. First, the HOA security team was not real security, just 2 retired men in ill-fitting uniforms trying very hard to look official. Second, half the neighborhood had gathered, phones out, because nothing attracts an audience faster than authority being challenged. And third, my daughter, calm, straight-backed, hands visible, eyes constantly moving, was treating this like a live-fire exercise instead of misunderstanding. One guard was standing too close to her window, hand resting on his holster, like he'd practiced in front of a mirror. The other was shouting about trespassing, bylaws, and suspicious behavior. I stepped out of my car and announced myself, but the man with the gun snapped his head toward me and barked, "Sir, stay back. This is an active situation." Active situation. Those words would have been funny if they weren't so dangerous. I asked calmly what the problem was, and the shorter guard launched into a rehearsed speech about unauthorized vehicles, national security threats. Yes, he actually said that, and how my daughter had refused to show proper identification. That was technically true. She had shown a driver's license, but she had refused to answer questions that went beyond that, because the moment he demanded to know why she was driving a government-style vehicle, she knew exactly what kind of person she was dealing with. What they didn't know, what no one there knew, was that my daughter commanded FBI tactical teams for a living, not desk work, not analysis. The people who kick in doors when everything else has failed. And she had spent her entire adult life training to de-escalate situations exactly like this, except usually the people pointing guns at her were criminals, not homeowners with inflated egos. When I tried to explain that this was unnecessary, the armed guard raised his voice and told me that interfering would get me restrained. That's when my daughter spoke, finally, and her voice cut through the noise like a blade. She told him to take his hand off the weapon. She didn't threaten him. She didn't identify herself. She simply stated that his behavior was unsafe and escalating a non-criminal encounter. The effect was immediate and completely unexpected. He froze, not because he respected her authority, but because something in her tone triggered a part of his brain that recognized command presence. The crowd went quiet. Even the birds seemed to stop. But ego is a powerful thing, and once it's bruised, it looks for revenge. The guard recovered and doubled down, shouting that she was now being detained for disorderly conduct. That's when he did the unthinkable. He unholstered the firearm and pointed it. Not directly at her head, but close enough that no trained professional would ever excuse it. I felt something primal snap inside me, but before I could move, my daughter raised one finger. Just one, a universal signal for stop. She looked him in the eye and said words I will never forget. "If you do not reholster that weapon right now, this situation will end very badly for you." The crowd gasped. Phones zoomed in, and then the Real police arrived. 2 cruisers rolled in fast, lights flashing, and the entire energy of the parking lot shifted. The HOA guards immediately started talking over each other, claiming threats, noncompliance, and hostile intent. One officer approached my daughter first, and the moment she met his eyes, she did something subtle. She shifted her stance, adjusted her breathing, and spoke quietly. Whatever she said, I couldn't hear, but I saw the officer's expression change. Confusion, then surprise, then something very close to concern. He nodded once, stepped away, and walked back to his partner. That's when the armed HOA guard realized he had made a catastrophic mistake. The officers separated everyone, asked for statements, and then, right there in the parking lot, asked the HOA guards a hand over their firearms. The shorter guard started protesting loudly, accusing my daughter of impersonating an officer, lying and playing tough. The taller one was pale. He had finally noticed the way my daughter had been scanning exits, clocking positions, measuring distances. The way she never once broke composure. He had seen that before, just not in a civilian woman standing in front of an SUV. One of the officers returned and addressed my daughter by her rank. That single word hit the crowd, like a thunderclap. Phone stopped recording. Mouths fell open. The armed guard looked like the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. My daughter calmly produced her credentials, and the officer examined them with visible respect. Then he turned very slowly and looked at the HOA guards. The conversation that followed was quiet, professional, and devastating. Unauthorized attention, brandishing a firearm, false imprisonment, escalation of force. The words stacked up like bricks, each one heavier than the last. By the end of it, the man who pulled the gun was sitting on the curb, hands cupped behind his back, staring straight ahead in disbelief. The other guard was being read his rights. The HOA president, who had arrived late and tried to smooth things over, was informed that the association's liability insurance was about to have a very bad week. And the crowd, neighbors who had nodded politely at those guards for years, suddenly understood how close they had come to witnessing a tragedy caused not by crime, but by arrogance. As for my daughter, she finally exhaled. The tension drained from her shoulders, and for the first time since that phone call, she looked tired, not shaken, not scared, just exhausted by the knowledge that she had handled the situation exactly as trained, and it still could have gone wrong because someone wanted to feel powerful. Later, as we drove home, she admitted something she had never said before, that facing armed civilians who believe they're the law is sometimes more dangerous than facing criminals who know they're breaking it. The HOA tried to bury the incident. They sent emails asking residents not to discuss it. They terminated the security contract quietly. They even offered an apology letter that was clearly written by a lawyer, but the videos were already online. The story had already spread. And when the civil lawsuit hit, wrongful detention, emotional distress, negligent training, the numbers were big enough to force a special assessment vote. The same neighbors who had once cheered strict enforcement now wanted to know why their dues were doubling.